The Napoleonic Wars, which extended from 1803 to 1815, were a seismic event that profoundly impacted Europe. Today, let's delve into the raw and unfiltered side of this era, shedding light on 10 particularly harrowing aspects. Brutal winter during the Russian campaign in 1812, Napoleon sought to expand his empire eastward, leading a gargantuan force into Russia. As his Grande Army advanced, optimism reigned. However, the Russians employed scorched earth tactics, retreating and depriving the invaders of supplies. As the seasons turned, the brutal Russian winter emerged as an enemy in its own right. Ill-equipped for such extreme cold, the French forces experienced temperatures plunging below -30 degrees Celsius. Soldiers' diaries from that time speak of ink freezing in its pot, breath turning to ice on facial hair, and the unending wind that sapped warmth and morale alike. Desperate hunger, the cold was only one of Napoleon's problems. As supplies grew scarce, hunger gnawed at the ranks. Soldiers, driven to desperation, scoured the frozen ground for any sustenance. Heartbreaking accounts describe men consuming everything from leather equipment to, in the direst of circumstances, the bodies of their deceased comrades. This grim period stands as a stark reminder of the human body's will to survive. Peninsular War atrocities, as Napoleon attempted to extend the continental system to the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal resisted, igniting the Peninsular War. This wasn't a straightforward conflict, but a quagmire of guerrilla warfare, with atrocities rampant on both sides. As French forces attempted to root out Spanish partisans, they often resorted to extreme measures. Civilian populations were frequently caught in the crossfire, with tales of entire villages being put to the torch and innocents suffering for the actions of a few. War surgeon horrors. Field medicine during the Napoleonic era was a far cry from what we understand today. Amidst the smoke and chaos of the battlefield, surgeons raced against time, often forced to amputate shattered limbs. Due to the lack of anesthesia, soldiers bit down on leather straps or drank copious amounts of alcohol to brace for the excruciating pain. Post-operative care was minimal, and infection was a constant threat, often proving more lethal than the original injury. The scale of death, the sheer magnitude of loss during the Napoleonic Wars is staggering. Conservative estimates claim 3.5 million deaths, but some historians believe the toll may have been closer to 6 million. This wasn't just a war of soldiers, it consumed civilians. From the streets of Paris to the farms of Russia, it redefined entire societies and left scars that would take generations to heal. Forced conscriptions. Napoleon was a military genius, but required vast armies to maintain his vision. To this end, the French state instituted aggressive conscription policies. Thousands of young men, many barely out of their teens, found themselves thrust into the brutal world of Napoleonic warfare. Letters from conscripts to their families paint a poignant picture of longing, fear, and often resignation to a fate they couldn't control. Looting and pillaging. Supply lines in the 19th century were often tenuous. To sustain his armies on long campaigns, Napoleon sometimes turned a blind eye to looting. The consequences of this policy were twofold. For occupied populations, it meant a loss of both precious heirlooms and essential resources. For the French forces, it often meant strained relations with the very people they sought to bring into Napoleon's continental vision. Total war tactics. Napoleon ushered in an era of total war. The line between combatant and civilian blurred. Cities, once considered refuges from the battles raging in the countryside, became targets. The rationale was simple but ruthless: undermine an enemy's infrastructure, and their will to fight diminishes. This strategy, while effective, meant that civilians bore a disproportionate amount of the war's suffering. Prisoner of war suffering. Being captured in the Napoleonic Wars wasn't a guarantee of safety. Prisoner of war camps, rudimentary and often overcrowded, were breeding grounds for disease. Malnutrition was rampant, and despair was a constant companion. Escape attempts, well celebrated in folklore, were often deadly endeavors, with recaptured soldiers facing severe penalties. bereaved families, war's echoes reverberated far beyond the front lines. Across Europe, families anxiously awaited news of loved ones. For many, the only word would come in the form of a tersely written casualty notice. Women became household heads overnight, and children grew up with the specter of a father or brother they'd never see again. The emotional trauma, often overshadowed by political and military histories, was profound and widespread. Closing, as we reflect on the grand strategies and political machinations of the Napoleonic Wars, it's essential to also remember the profound human cost. These tales of suffering serve as a somber reminder of war's true toll and underscore the value of peace. Closing music.